So you're probably all wondering how I got 1200 elemental mastery on my Sucrose. Well, let's see the build here. For the artifacts, I've got 4-piece Veritas Inverter. For the last 3 artifacts, I've got elemental mastery maxed on all of the main stats. And yeah, I have a level 0 flower. But then you might ask, wait, that only gives me 657 elemental mastery. That's not 1200. Well, what I'm about to tell you might surprise you, but the 1200 elemental mastery was staged. My build does not give me 1200 elemental mastery from the start, but I will now show you how it was done. So my first secret weapon is another character with the instructor 4-piece set, which will give everybody in your party a 120 elemental mastery bonus every time the character triggers an elemental reaction. And my second secret weapon is an actual weapon this time. It's the Wood Sith with a refinement for Wood Sith. Every time I switch to Sucrose, I have 1 in 3 chance of getting an elemental mastery bonus of 420. So putting it all together, this is what it looks like. I use Venti to swirl the enemy, which triggers the instructor set bonus, which will give my character 120 elemental mastery bonus. So now we're at 777 elemental mastery. And then we switch to Sucrose, and the Wood Sith gives us a bonus, and we go to 1197 elemental mastery. That is absolutely crazy, and this lasts for 10 seconds, so I can do some serious damage in that time. So now you might be asking, is this much elemental mastery actually worth it? Does it actually do anything? Well, elemental mastery is only used to increase the damage of elemental reactions, so to make it worth your while, you want to make as many elemental reactions happen as possible with Sucrose. So here you see me use Diona to apply cryo on the enemies, and I use Venti to trigger the instructor set bonus, and I switch to Sucrose. Check that I have 1200 elemental mastery, and we use her E, and let's just slow that down for you. Here you can see it's swirling the cryo element that we applied, and it's doing 2300 damage there. And then in the background, if you can see, there's actually a 5-digit melt damage there. The pyro is actually coming from the torch in the back, and it's triggering melt, and it's doing a 5-digit damage. And if we go to the next one, we can actually see this clearer. There's actually 2 melts on both of the enemies now. 13,900 damage and 10,800 damage. That is crazy for Sucrose. Remember, this damage doesn't come from her attack. This damage comes directly and only from her level and elemental mastery. So she can have 0 attack stat and she'll still do this much damage. So here we can do that again with a little bit more enemies. We apply cryo, we trigger the instructor set bonus, switch to Sucrose, 12,000 elemental mastery. We use her E, and let's just pause that there. We can see this time we triggered cryo on pyro, which is less of a bonus, but we can see 8,000 melt damage. Again, that is a crazy number to beat on Sucrose because it comes directly from her elemental mastery, not her attack. So the 1200 EM Sucrose build, while a cool proof of concept, is not really practical since there's only 1 in 3 chance of getting elemental mastery boost from the Wood Sith. So I would not suggest using that. Other than that, I can actually show you my actual recommended Sucrose build. This time with only 859 elemental mastery, a pretty low number, pretty normal. And for the weapon, instead of the Wood Sith, we're using the sacrificial fragments. I only have refinement 1, but it does give you a substat of elemental mastery. With level 80, it gives you 201, which is really good. Every time you use an elemental skill, there's 40% chance to end its own skill, and this applies to both of Sucrose's charges. This means there's almost a guaranteed chance to get 3 charges on her E. To keep the artifacts the same as the 1200 EM Sucrose build. Constellation, I have full constellations. Talents, we don't use normal attacks on Sucrose, and we got level 10 and level 11 for the E and the Q respectively. So in total, this gives us not a lot of attack, an elemental mastery of 859, pretty low, but it will still increase your vape and melt damage by 105, everything else by 253. And Sucrose is a support character, and this is a support build, so I'll show you Sucrose on a few different teams. So first, let's just see how much more damage we can do with Sucrose on our team. So first, without Sucrose, I'm going to be triggering Melt with Klee's charge attack, and on crit, you can see we get around 26,000 damage. And we can try that again with Sucrose this time. We swirl the Pyro, and then we do the thing, we get a crit of 44,504. That's basically a double increase in the melt damage on Klee's charge attack there, just from one swirl from Sucrose. That is absolutely insane. That is the best support character you can ever ask for. So this time we're doing another comparison with the same team. This time we're going to be doing Vaporize. So we have Shincho using his Q, and then we use Klee to take down the flower. And as you can see, if we use Sucrose, then we take down the flower way quicker. So Sucrose is good on any team, but she's the best if the team is focused around elemental reactions, since Sucrose can amplify those elemental reactions. So here's a team that I really like. It's only support characters or sub DPS characters. There's no main DPS, but look at the damage we're still doing with all the characters. We have Fischl C6, Shincho C6, using their ults and E's, and then we attack with Sucrose to trigger lots and lots of elemental reactions on everyone at the same time. And as you can see, we are proccing Frozen so many times with Diona attacking maybe once every 20 seconds. It's really hard to use Diona on a permafreeze team, but with Sucrose, anything is possible. One of the most satisfying things to do in this game has to be using Sucrose's E to trigger elemental reactions. So here we have some wet enemies, and I'm gonna be applying Pyro to one of them, and then using Sucrose to swirl them together. And let's just pause that right there and take into account what just happened. So Sucrose's E triggers animal damage, and since the enemies already have elements applied to them, using animal on them will trigger swirl, which will make that element spread to other enemies nearby. And since some enemies have different elements applied to them, the different elements are swirled onto each other, which will cause elemental reactions. In this case, it's causing Vaporize, since we swirled the Pyro to all of the Hydro ones, and we swirled the Hydro onto the Pyro one. So we can do a frame analysis here for Sucrose's E. The first thing that will come up is the text for the swirl. Immediately after that, we can see Super Conduct popping up. This is because we have Electro and Cryo swirled into each other, so it's triggering damage. The first set is the animal damage directly from Sucrose, and the second set is the swirl damage from Sucrose, and the third set is going to be Super Conduct damage. So here we see the green animal damage and the purple and blue swirl damage, and after that, another set of Cryo damage from the Super Conduct, which triggers twice. You can see a double of each cryo number on all of the enemies. So here we can see Sucrose using her Q. So her Q is about to go off for the first time, or you can already see the swirl coming up, which should be the first thing that comes up. You can also see Frozen and Melt coming up, and in the middle of the numbers you can actually also see Vaporize. So right now we got swirl on the screen, Frozen on the screen, Melt on the screen, Vaporize on the screen. So what we expect to see is that the swirl first is triggered by the animal damage, so animal damage should come first, and then here we have Hydro and Cryo and Pyro on one or some of the enemies, so we should expect to see swirl damage for all of them, and that's exactly what we see. We have a giant cluster of colorful numbers here with 4 different types of elemental reactions triggering from one attack. We can see multiple melts here. The enemies even ended up frozen. So now we pop Fischl's Q to trigger Super Conduct, and after that we see Sucrose's Q goes off again, this time actually swirling the Electro and the Hydro together, which produces Electro Charge, and it goes up again, this time spreading Electro to more people. So first it does animal damage, so we should see green numbers, then that causes swirl, so that swirls Electro and Hydro, so we should see blue and purple numbers. After that it'll produce Electro Charge, which will give you further purple numbers. So in that little sequence we saw 6 different elemental reactions. We have swirl, Vaporize, Melt, Frozen, Super Conduct, and Electro Charge in that tiny clip. This team is one of my favorite teams for sure. It's really enjoyable to play with this team. It's very satisfying whenever I use Sucrose's E or Q. So let's just enjoy Montage. So you might think, oh, this team is good for a large crowd of weak people, but what can it do against a singular strong opponent? So here we have the boss with both the raised hydro and electro resistance. Let's see how our team does. And as expected, we absolutely decimated him, though you can't tell me this team is bad. Overall, Sucrose goes well with any team, and if you want to put her on a team with elemental reactions, she's just straight up going to raise your elemental mastery, so that cannot go wrong. And other than that, I'll see you next time.